Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, today we're going to paint this Bluejay. You can see I've already drawn it out here. It's going to be a fairly tight painting, so as such I needed to draw it out fairly detailed, very lightly. I just used the 0.5 mechanical pencil to do that. And we're going to be painting on this Hahnemühle Expression. This is a first time for me. I've not used this paper before. This is a 100% cotton, 100% rag paper. Just a beautiful paper. This is a 140 pound block, 300 GSM block. Now Hahnemühle, if you've seen any of my other videos where I reviewed Hahnemühle, I've just been very impressed with them. And my criteria usually for paper is that I don't notice anything. I know that sounds weird, but generally I want paper to just get out of my way and let me do what I want to do. Usually when I notice a characteristic, 9 times out of 10 it's negative. Now that's not always the case, but I've been painting with arches for 40 years. Arches has always been the standard for me, and lately we've just had a string of really good papers in the last 2 or 3 years. Newer papers that have come on the market. Some of them great, some of them not too bad. Hahnemühle has just been fantastic, what you would expect from a really old company that's been making paper for a long time. Now in the past videos I've reviewed Leonardo and Cezanne, both excellent papers. These are cylinder mold made papers. This is their 140 pound paper, this is their 300 pound paper, and now they have the Expression, which is, I guess, just a machine-made paper, since they say nothing about being mold-made. Surface size, they're all surface size, but this one features surface sizing, so the lifting is supposed to be pretty good. The color holdout is supposed to be really good. I'll have more thoughts on it at the end, but let's get painting. So this is the reference I'm going to start with. I actually have 3 main ones, and I sort of drew my own sort of Frankenbird based on all 3. This one I like the best for light. I really got some great light cues, dynamic light cues, and color of light cues from that last one. But this bird is of my own sort of invention, just using ideas from all 3. And I'm going to be using Copic liners to work in the markings. Now this is kind of a neat technique where you have really dark elements, especially feathers that have a texture to them. And in the painting they're going to be nearly black anyway. It's a great idea to use permanent liners, which is what I'm doing here. So I'm just sort of hatching in the markings. All the markings, or the darkest markings on a Bluejay, are all almost black. I'm not going to black them in solid because I do want to leave open. I do want to paint over them with some color like a blue black or a violet black or something, just to have some color in the blacks. So it's not just a pure black, but it's helpful, I think, to stroke those in with hatching. As I mentioned, it gets in the texture, the feather texture. The other reason though is because it's going to be seen well, or pretty well, through the washes that go on top. So as I add washes, you'll see this particularly in the blue feathers. As I add washes on top, if it were pencil, it'd just get lost and I would have trouble seeing, but I can just wash right over these ink hatched in areas. And I'm just going to go through the whole bird and do this. Some places it's just shadow, really dark shadows that are very linear. In other cases it's sort of black banding on the feathers. It really works great for the eye because so much of the eye has black little linear aspects. And I'll outline the eye as you're seeing me do here, but I'll also leave some space. The light coming in on the one Bluejay that I used for reference really highlighted the color in the eye, which was a nice brown. So I wanted to be able to incorporate that. But wherever it was black, pretty much just lining that in. I didn't use any masking fluid in this. That first rank of feathers at the base of the wing has some white tips on it. You'll see them when I start painting. I could have, I thought about it, but I really am not doing a lot of contiguous washes where I need continuity throughout the wash, so I figured they'd be easy enough to paint around. That's the kind of decisions you need to make, you know, when you're using masking fluid. If it's easy enough to paint around with precision, if you need precision, and you're not trying to get continuity of your wash through that area, then yeah, by all means paint around it. Don't worry about masking fluid. And here I'm just wetting the background. I just want to add some very soft, puffy washes. I don't want anything real distracting in the background. So, and I have a lot of you ask me, you don't know what to do with the background. It's probably one of the most artistic parts. By that meaning, there's so much you could do. So it's not like there's something or some formula you follow. It's just do whatever you want to do. I like to paint backgrounds in first. I don't always do it, but I like to because it helps me get the values right on the bird. But I feel generally less is more when it comes to a background. So err on the side of, if you're really featuring the bird. Now, if you're painting it in a scene, that's different. But if you're really featuring a bird, less is more. I'm placing these washes where I think they will do the most benefit in contrasting bright light areas, like the head. I added that little puff of wet and wet wash up there by the head because I need some contrast. That head is going to be left almost white to portray the light. So start out with less. Don't get too distracting with your backgrounds when you're really showcasing a bird or any other thing for that matter. Just keep the background simple. In this case, I kept the background loose and neutral. Obviously starting to lay in the base washes for these feathers. And you'll see that I do ramp the value around the bird. I'm trying to get across that, the roundness of the body. The light's coming from the right very strongly, upper right. So you will see color in these washes graduate from the back of the bird over towards the front. To very light values. I know I've mentioned it in other videos, but light has just become so important to me in any painting. I think it's so much more important than detail. And you will see that I add a lot of detail in this, but the detail is always subservient to the value and helps to portray the light, the essence of light, the effect of light and value. I rarely add detail just for detail's sake anymore. It's usually to in the case of a bird, you want to get across the breed accurately, so there's that, but you also want to accentuate the light and how the light's hitting the bird and round out that form. The blues I'm using are mainly cobalt. Cobalt is a large part of the base, but I will mix in little bits of Phthalo Blue on occasion, little bits of Cerulean on occasion. I'll gray it in spots with Paynes Gray. And some places where I want some warmer bits on the bird, I'm using neutral tint. We'll talk about those colors more when we get to the body, but a large portion of the blue on the Bluejay's feather was cobalt with slight mixes of cerulean. and occasionally just a touch of Phthalo Blue green shade. This part had a little violet in it too, and I'm using my M-Gram Studio palette, and the neutral tint on M-Gram has a violet cast to it. So I used that a lot, maybe even bumped up the violet a little bit with Cobalt Violet. I get all these colors out on my palette, and then I'm not even sure anymore when what I'm mixing. I just start shifting what I see on the palette here and there. But those are the basic colors. And gray is something you need to pay attention to in your reference, because gray is rarely gray. It always has some kind of cast, or almost always. So those upper shoulder and neck feathers on the Bluejay had a very distinct violet cast. So sometimes, in your reference you'll get casts you don't like or unnatural caused by the photography, but this was natural. It was a real pretty sort of blue-gray violet. We're going to start on the body feathers, the underside and the front, and there was a very dynamic sense of light I wanted to portray. So around the tail, under the tail, and above the feet was a shadowy area, and the colors were very sort of tawny. And for that I used sepia, a little bit of Cobalt Violet, not enough to really tell it was violet, but just to redden up the mixture in places. And other places I actually brought in a touch of Quinacridone Gold, but again, so little you'd never be able to tell. I just wanted to keep the gray very warm and tawny. Mostly just I'll be doing the legs and the feet more later, but I mostly use Paynes Gray for that. And here I didn't hatch in the bands on the tail as much as I did the markings on the face, because in the reference there was some real bluishness to those, so I left those areas more open. I just added enough hatching for texture and to be able to see through the washes. But I'm going in and I'm finishing up some of these markings now. One of the most striking things about a Bluejay are the markings. Just a real dapper looking bird. I mean, they're very handsome. They don't come on my bird feeder that often, but I really pay attention when they do. They're larger than most bird feeder birds, and they're just very striking. So here is mixes of Paynes Gray on the foot, some sepia. Occasionally I'll throw in again some Cobalt Violet. Added the little brown to the eye there. That really makes that sparkle. And we're mostly getting into touches now. I was happy that the light effect was coming out the way I wanted. I wanted that striking upper right light on the face and breast, and I thought that came through pretty well. And so I'm going to add these details in again to make my point. There are little feathers that stood out, and those were great, but I didn't add them just for the sake of seeing those little feathers in the face. They help me establish where the value and light is coming. Sound like a broken record, but man, I can't tell you in my career as an artist what a discovery that was for me. to learn how to portray light. I could portray this bird with much less detail, and if I got the light and value right, you would still think it was a pretty detailed and realistic looking bird. It's that important. Beginners and even a lot of intermediate artists or occasional artists, they just paint too flat. Yeah, most people I see who are still learning, and I would say this not for discouragement, I say this for something to aim at. Get away from painting flat. Study light. Study light in every situation, almost more than you study your subject. Now, true, anatomy is important and proportion, but study the light and look for dynamic light. Look for a reference that gives you those dynamics. Obviously, I've been putting in the tree limb he's standing on, and a lot of that's wet and wet, but I'm starting to add the detail now that it's drying out, and I'm also trying to get that same light. If you look at the foot farthest away, you'll see a cast shadow under the bird there. Those little touches are what I'm talking about with light. This is mostly sepia, a little bit of red iron oxide, not enough to show intensely. In places, I'll add a little bit of green. It all looks on video here fairly neutral, but I try to get some life, even subtle color life, into these neutrals. It shows it shows when you paint something monochromatically. Like if I just, let's say, painted this branch all sepia, you could tell the difference. It wouldn't have as much color life. Now, as for the Hahnemühle Expressions paper, absolutely fantastic. And time will tell, but I'm just very happy overall with all the Hahnemühle papers, and this is just another one. Really nice paper. This is about the only place I used white. A few places on the feather, but I wanted to weave the really light feathers where light was striking the breast into the darker shadow under the rump area there. And I get just a nice meshing. I really didn't use white anywhere else. I did add some highlights to the upper part of the wing. That's pretty much it. Thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope that gave you some ideas. Painting birds, a lot of fun. Patrons, I am going to do an outline version of this for you that I will upload to Patreon, and you can transfer that to your watercolor paper and paint it yourself without drawing it. This is a new feature that I'm adding. It's really not level specific. It'll be depending on whether the video is shared at a particular level. For instance, if it's a video I share a commentary with only at the $10 and above level, I'll have it for that level. If it's for $5 and above, I'll have it for that level. But I'm going to try to start adding outlines that you can, or drawings at least, that you can transfer and just paint right away. Thanks everyone. Thank you so much for your support, patrons, and we'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.